Let's start with something brutally honest. Most people are losing not because they lack talent, but because they're too busy watching everyone else win. They scroll, they complain, they compare, they wait. And while they're looking at everyone else's life, their own is standing still. The truth is simple. Your life changes the moment you shift your focus from others to yourself. When you stop worrying about who has what, who is ahead, who is growing faster, who looks more successful, you free up the energy you need to build your own future. The world doesn't reward the loudest opinions, the richest excuses, or the longest complaints. It rewards the person who works. If you're watching others, you're not building yourself. Focus creates progress. Too many people spend their time analyzing what others are doing, how fast they're growing, or what results they are achieving. The problem is that attention is a currency, and when you spend it on other people, you have none left to invest in your own growth. Every minute spent comparing is a minute not spent improving. Progress requires direction, and direction requires focus. When all of your focus is pointed at yourself, your work, your skills, your execution, you begin to accumulate momentum. Most people wait for motivation before they start, but the truth is motivation comes from action, not observation. If you want your life to move forward, stop using your energy watching others and start building something worth watching yourself. Your only real competition is who you were yesterday. Winning in life isn't about being better than the guy next to you. It's about being better than your last version. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is built one day at a time. When you stop measuring yourself against others, something powerful happens. You finally start competing in a game you can actually win. You can control your habits. You can control your effort. You can control your progress. The only scoreboard that matters is the one that tracks whether today's version of you is sharper, stronger, smarter, or more disciplined than yesterday's. If you improve daily, even by a small fraction, you become someone very few people can keep up with. Success isn't loud. It doesn't start on stages in spotlight moments or with public recognition. It starts in quiet rooms where no one is clapping and no one is cheering yet. Success is built in the hours when nobody is paying attention, the early mornings when everyone else is sleeping, the late nights when comfort tells you to quit, and the moments when no one cares except you. If your ego needs applause to take action, you'll never get far because most of your journey will happen unnoticed. Real greatness is earned long before it is acknowledged. When you put in enough silent hours, the noise eventually comes on its own. Stop chasing validation. Too many people would rather look successful than actually be successful. They want approval, recognition, likes, attention, and external support before they've done the work. But validation is a trap. It makes you dependent on other people's reactions instead of your own standards. Skill, discipline, and results don't come from being admired. They come from showing up consistently when no one is watching. The moment you stop working for applause and start working for progress, everything changes. The scoreboard becomes internal, the accountability becomes personal, and results become real. Skill is the ultimate advantage, and it is earned through repetition and discomfort. If you want to grow, you have to practice what others avoid. Growth doesn't come from knowing, it comes from doing. Reading the book isn't enough. Learning the tactic isn't enough. Watching the tutorial isn't enough. You must execute again and again until competence becomes mastery. People who improve consistently aren't lucky. They're committed. They repeat the boring work. They drill fundamentals. They endure the frustration that most people quit under. And over time, that advantage compounds into results others can't match. 1% improvement every day doesn't sound dramatic, but it is life-changing over time. People overestimate what they can do once with a burst of effort and underestimate what they can do with consistent effort over months and years. The math is simple. Small improvements, repeated daily, turn ordinary people into exceptional ones. You don't need giant leaps forward. You need daily forward motion, no matter how small. That's how businesses scale, how skills sharpen, how bodies transform, and how lives change. If you can do something today that makes you slightly better than you were yesterday, you are already winning. Life won't wait for someone to hand you permission, confidence, or the perfect moment. Growth begins the moment you decide to stop hesitating and start building. Every day gives you a chance to increase your value, gain more knowledge, improve your execution, sharpen your discipline, and expand your potential. Most people fail not because they try and lose, but because they never truly start. Consistency beats brilliance when brilliance is inconsistent. Showing up today matters. Showing up tomorrow matters more. Progress is a habit, not a personality trait. You don't need a better world. You need a better version of yourself. People blame circumstances, conditions, and the environment when the real limitation is usually internal. The more you improve yourself, the less the world can limit you. Skills give you options. Discipline gives you freedom. Growth gives you leverage. When you focus on becoming someone stronger, smarter, and more capable, life begins to open in ways it never did before. Problems shrink, opportunities grow, And instead of needing chances, you start creating them. The person doing the work becomes the person who wins. Your only real competition is who you were yesterday. Most people waste years trying to measure themselves against others, forgetting that everyone is running a different race with different circumstances, different timelines, and different advantages. When you compare yourself to others, you set goals that have nothing to do with the life you actually want to build. The only comparison that makes sense is between the person you were yesterday and the person you are today, because that is the only version of the game you can control. If you wake up each day determined to become a slightly better version of yourself, improvement becomes inevitable. Your progress stops depending on the world and starts depending on your effort, your decisions, and your standards. Real growth begins the moment you stop chasing someone else's story and start writing your own. Beating yesterday's version of yourself is not about perfection, it's about direction. You don't have to make massive leaps every day. You don't need life-changing breakthroughs every morning. What matters is forward motion, no matter how small. Read one more page, learn one more skill, push one more rep, make one more deliberate decision that your future self will thank you for. When you stack small improvements repeatedly, the difference becomes dramatic over time. Most people underestimate what slow and steady effort can accomplish because they are trained to look for overnight change. But the truth is that small, consistent progress grows into something others mistake for talent or luck. Self-competition builds a mindset that is unshakable. When you compete with yourself, you remove the instability that comes from comparing to others. Their success doesn't threaten you. Their advantage doesn't discourage you. Their pace doesn't pressure you. Instead of feeling behind, you start to feel responsible. You realize that progress doesn't come from beating someone else. It comes from taking ownership of your own execution. When your target is internal, your emotional resilience increases. No matter what circumstances you face, you can still improve yourself in some way. With that mindset, you become impossible to stop because nothing external can prevent internal progress. Most people don't lose because they lack ability. They lose because they lack measurement. They never establish a daily standard that lets them check whether they actually moved forward. If you want improvement to be real, you need to track it, even in simple ways. Did you learn something new today? Did you practice a skill? Did you maintain your discipline? Did you change a behavior that needed improvement? When you measure yourself honestly, you gain clarity. Without measurement, you're guessing. With measurement, you're building. Data beats emotion, and progress becomes visible instead of theoretical. Becoming better than your past self requires facing truths that others avoid. You have to admit your weaknesses. You have to recognize where you fall short. You have to confront the fact that your current habits have created your current results. Most people protect their ego instead of protecting their future. They blame circumstances instead of choices. They justify instead of adjust. When you stop trying to defend where you are and start focusing on building where you want to go, you turn accountability into power. Improvement becomes easier when you start pretending and start confronting reality as it is. Self-focused growth is not passive. It requires discomfort. Improvement demands doing others avoid, studying longer, practicing harder, failing publicly, starting again, pushing your limits, and choosing discipline when comfort tempts you. Growth always has a cost. The price is effort, consistency, and patience. That is why so few people achieve meaningful progress, not because they can't, but because they don't want to pay the price. When you accept discomfort as the currency of success, everything becomes simpler. You stop expecting ease and you start expecting challenge. That shift alone puts you ahead of most people. The advantage of competing with yourself is that you can always win. There will always be someone stronger, smarter, faster, richer, or further along. But yesterday's you has a fixed score. You know exactly what they did, what they knew, and what level they were operating at. If you do more today than they did, you win. If you learn more today than they knew, you win. If you behave better, execute better, think better, or make better decisions, you win. And when you win enough days in a row, something powerful happens. Not only do you improve, but you redefine what you once believed was possible. The race against your past self is the only race that guarantees growth. Every day you have the chance to increase your capability, expand your knowledge, sharpen your discipline, and change the trajectory of your future in incremental ways. You don't need applause, recognition, or competition to accelerate. You need commitment. When your life becomes a constant practice of improving who you are, you stop needing external pressure to move forward. Progress becomes your natural state, and momentum stops being temporary and becomes part of who you are. Success isn't loud, it's built in silent rooms where nobody is clapping yet. Most people only see the highlight moments, the results, the breakthroughs, the recognition, the applause. They never see the early mornings when fatigue is crushing, the late nights when the world is asleep, or the sacrifices that don't make it to social media. True success is created in private long before is celebrated in public. The silence is part of the process. When there is no audience, no approval, and no acknowledgement, only discipline remains. And it is in those quiet, unglamorous hours where real transformation begins. Working in silence is difficult because humans are wired to seek visible validation. We want someone to notice our effort, to recognize our grind, to tell us we are doing well. But validation is unreliable. If you build your ambition on applause, your progress will rise and fall with other people's attention. Silence forces you to build your own internal scoreboard. It forces you to work for progress, not praise. If you can learn to execute even when nobody is cheering, you have already developed a competitive advantage that most people never reach. Silence is also where fear shows up. When you're alone with your work, there's nothing to hide behind. You confront your weaknesses, your procrastination, your distractions, and your excuses. Most people avoid this confrontation because silence brings clarity. It reveals where you are actually working or just pretending. It exposes the gap between what you want and what you're willing to do. But facing that truth is necessary because improvement only starts when you stop lying to yourself about your effort and your commitment. The quiet phase of success is where mastery is built. Skill doesn't come from occasional bursts of motivation. It comes from repetition, from putting in the work when you don't feel like it, from drilling fundamentals until they become instinct. Nobody sees the hours an athlete spends training when no competition is happening. Nobody sees the drafts that never get published, the business plans that get rewritten, the failures that turn into experience. Mastery is invisible until it isn't. By the time people admire your talent, they are actually looking at thousands of hours they never witnessed. Silence is also where consistency is tested. Anyone can work hard once. Anyone can stay focused for a day or a week. But sustaining effort over months and years with no audience, no spotlight, and no external rewards, that is where most people quit. Consistency in silence is what separates dreamers from builders. The world rewards outcomes, but the universe keeps track of effort. Every rep, every hour, every attempt compounds quietly. Most breakthroughs are simply the delayed interest of consistency that nobody noticed while it was accumulating. When you're building in silence, doubt becomes a constant companion. You may wonder whether you're progressing fast enough, whether the effort is worth it, whether results will ever come. Doubt is normal, but it becomes dangerous only when it leads to quitting. The people who eventually succeed are not the ones who never question themselves. They are the ones who worked through the questioning. Persistence through doubt is one of the rarest skills, and silence is where it is developed and strengthened. Success also requires accepting that nobody owes you recognition. You can work harder than everyone and still receive no applause. You can put in enormous effort and still go unnoticed. But that is exactly how it should be. The world won't celebrate potential. It celebrates proof. Your job is not to be seen, it's to become undeniable. When your results get big enough, people will notice. But the work required to reach that stage will always happen before the recognition. You must be responsible for your own momentum long before the world ever acknowledges it. The beauty of silent work is that it transforms you before it transforms your circumstances. While the results are still invisible to the world, they are already reshaping your mindset, your identity, your habits, and your standards. You become stronger, more capable, more disciplined, and more confident, not because anyone told you, it's because you earned it through action. By the time the results finally become public, you are no longer the same person who began. You have built the ability, the resilience, and the internal strength that can't be taken away because the work that built it lives in the silent hours where nobody was clapping. Most people spend their lives chasing validation, hoping that someone will approve of their effort before they even finish the work. They hold back until they receive support, encouragement, or recognition, forgetting that success is not a group vote. When you build your decisions around praise, your identity becomes dependent on other people's reactions. If they cheer, you move. If they stay silent, you stall. Living that way keeps you trapped in a cycle where progress is controlled by external voices instead of your own standards. The truth is simple: you cannot build a strong life on weak validation. Validation feels good because it creates the illusion of progress. A like, a comment, a compliment, or someone saying they believe, and you can feel like achievement. The problem is that none of those things change your actual circumstances. You can feel successful without becoming successful, and that is the danger. When people receive praise too early, they often stop pushing because the validation gives them a temporary sense of accomplishment. Real achievement doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being improved. Progress is measured in capability, not compliments. Chasing validation also distracts you from chasing mastery. When your priority is being admired, you start choosing tasks that are easy to show off instead of tasks that actually make you better. You pick what looks good instead of what works. The projects that grow you the most are usually the ones nobody sees: practicing a skill alone, studying when nobody cares, building something without attention, starting from zero while others are watching. Growth is rarely glamorous in the beginning. It takes humility to do the work that doesn't impress anyone yet. Skill, on the other hand, is a currency that the world always respects. When you build a real skill, something valuable, rare, and hard-earned. You never have to beg for attention. Your work speaks for you. Skill gives you leverage. It gives you confidence that is not built on the opinions of others, but on competence you earned through repetition and effort. When you are skilled, you don't need to explain why you deserve an opportunity. You become the opportunity. Respect becomes a side effect of performance, not a requirement for motivation. Discipline is the bridge between ambition and achievement. Anyone can want success, but only the discipline will pursue it when circumstances are unfavorable. Discipline is doing what needs to be done, even when you don't feel like it, even when nobody is applauding, even when the results are slow. That is why disciplined people outperform talented people so often. Talent is potential. Discipline is execution. Most people know what they need to do. They just don't do it consistently. Discipline turns knowing into becoming. Results are the most honest feedback you will ever receive. They don't care about how hard you tried, how badly you wanted it, or how much praise you received. Results reflect the truth, your habits, your decisions, your execution, and your standards. While validation comforts the ego, results expose reality. And reality is important because you cannot improve what you refuse to measure. When you focus on results instead of recognition, your decisions become sharper. You stop asking, will people like this? And start asking, will this move me forward? Chasing validation means you are building for attention. Chasing results means you are building for growth. When you shift your priority from being liked to being effective, everything changes. You stop waiting for motivation. You stop needing permission. You stop slowing down when others don't approve. You start operating from a place of internal drive rather than external influence. That shift is powerful because external approval is inconsistent, but internal commitment can be permanent. When you are focused on the work, progress becomes automatic. People who chase skill, discipline, and results eventually earn validation without trying. The irony is that the world pays the most attention to people who stopped asking for it. When you invest your energy into becoming exceptional instead of appearing exceptional, your growth becomes undeniable. You become someone who stands out, not because you demanded recognition, but because your output, your consistency, and your improvement forced the world to notice. And by that point, validation is no longer something you need. It becomes merely a side effect of the person you have become. 1% improvement every day doesn't look impressive in the moment, and that is exactly why most people ignore it. We are conditioned to chase dramatic transformations, overnight success, and instantly visible progress. But real growth rarely happens in explosive jumps. It happens in small, almost invisible increments that accumulate over time. 1% feels insignificant today and tomorrow and even next week. But while most people look for shortcuts, the person improving by 1% daily is quietly building a future that will outpace everyone looking for quick wins. Small progress works because it is achievable and repeatable. Anyone can be disciplined for one day. Anyone can study for an extra 15 minutes, make one extra sales call, write one more page, train one more set, or improve one small part of their process. 1% improvement does not require perfection. It requires persistence. The bar is low enough to hit every day, yet high enough to create massive long-term change. When progress feels too big, we procrastinate. When progress feels manageable, we act, and when we act consistently, results follow. The math behind 1% improvement is simple but powerful. If you get 1% better every single day for a year, you end up 37 times better, not 37%. That is the power of compounding. Growth stacked on growth. Improvement multiplied by consistency. Most people underestimate compounding because they judge progress only by what is visible today. But excellence doesn't come from what you accomplish in a single burst. It comes from what you consistently do without dramatic fluctuations. Small improvement, multiplied daily, surpasses occasional intensity every time. The hardest part is sticking with the process when the results are not yet visible. In the beginning, it feels like nothing is changing. You're putting in the effort but seeing little difference. This is where most people stop. They mistake slow progress for no progress. But compounding always starts quietly. A seed planted in the ground shows no signs of growth for a long time, yet everything is happening below the surface. Skills are developing, habits are strengthening, and identity is evolving. Even if the world can't see it yet, patience turns slow growth into unstoppable momentum. 1% improvement forces you to focus on the controllable your actions today. You cannot control how fast others grow, what opportunities you receive, or how quickly external circumstances shift. But you can control what you do with the next 24 hours. When you approach your life from the perspective of daily improvement, you remove excuses. Improvement becomes a responsibility rather than a possibility. Every day becomes a chance to close the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Your potential stops being theoretical and starts becoming practical. Small improvements require self-honesty. You have to look at yourself and ask, what is one thing I can do today that will make me better than I was yesterday? Sometimes the answer is working harder. Sometimes it's recovering better. Sometimes it's studying more, eliminating a bad habit, developing a skill, or making a tough decision. Improvement is rarely about doing more of everything, it's about doing one thing with intention. The people who grow the fastest are the ones who constantly refine their behavior instead of repeating the same day over and over. 1% improvement compounds not just in skill, but in confidence. Every time you follow through, you prove something to yourself. You can rely on your own effort. And repeated proof creates internal certainty. You no longer need motivation because your self-belief becomes built on action instead of emotion. The person who improves daily stops hoping for success and starts expecting it, not because they feel entitled, but because they have seen themselves execute consistently. Confidence earned through execution is unshakable because it is based on evidence, not imagination. Eventually, the world sees the difference. The small improvements that once felt invisible become undeniable. People who never noticed your effort suddenly notice your results. They label you talented, gifted, lucky, or naturally skilled without understanding that the breakthrough they're seeing is simply the delayed interest of consistent 1% improvements. The transformation looks sudden to others, but you know it wasn't. It was built day by day, rep by rep, decision by decision, when no one else was paying attention. Here is an expanded version of that point in 8 long paragraphs. No headings, no conclusion, no ending sentence. You don't need a better world. You need a better version of yourself. People spend most of their lives hoping external conditions change before they're willing to change themselves. They wait for the economy to get stronger, for the market to improve, for their boss to recognize them, for their family to support them, for circumstances to become more convenient. But the truth is that the world is never going to rearrange itself around your weaknesses. It doesn't slow down because you're tired. It doesn't pause because you're unprepared. The world rewards the people who adapt, upgrade, and evolve, not the ones who sit still and hope life becomes easier. Every breakthrough you want begins with changing the person you are today. If you become a disciplined person, discipline changes your environment. If you become a skilled person, skill changes your opportunities. If you become a high-value person, value changes how the world responds to you. People wait for external validation before developing internal transformation, but the sequence is always reversed. Someone who invests in themselves becomes someone the world cannot ignore. Progress on the outside is always the result of progress on the inside. And most people never understand how much power they truly have because they spend more time wishing for change than building themselves into someone capable of creating it. The biggest mistake is believing the problem is out there. If life is unfair, someone assumes they're unlucky. If they fail at business, they blame the market. If they can't stay consistent, they blame circumstances. This mindset gives away all personal power. When you believe the external world is the limiting factor, you stop improving because you've convinced yourself improvement wouldn't matter. But when you accept that the only thing truly holding you back is the current version of you, everything changes. You stop fighting the world and start building yourself into someone who can win in whatever world exists. Becoming a better version of yourself doesn't mean chasing perfection. It means removing the limitations, habits, and excuses that keep you operating below your potential. It means studying instead of scrolling, improving instead of complaining, taking accountability instead of assigning blame. Most people avoid self-improvement because it demands honesty. It requires you to look at your results and say, this is not good enough and I can do better. That level of self-awareness is uncomfortable, but it is also the starting line of every major transformation you will ever experience. A better self creates a better reality. If you learn to manage your emotions, small problems stop feeling like disasters. If you build financial literacy, money stops controlling your life. If you develop courage, opportunities stop scaring you. If you build discipline, momentum becomes part of your identity. External conditions don't magically get better, but they begin to feel different because you are different. When you grow, life shrinks. Obstacles that used to overwhelm you become temporary inconveniences. Challenges that used to break you become strengthening reps. The world becomes easier not because it changed, but because the person navigating it became stronger. When you upgrade yourself, you don't just change what you achieve, you change what becomes possible. People operate according to the limits of their identity. If someone believes they are average, they behave in average ways and accept average results. If they believe they are capable, they take actions aligned with capability. A person who sees themselves as a leader starts acting like one long before others recognize them. Internal identity is the blueprint of external achievement. When you build a stronger identity, your actions rise to match it, and life moves in the same direction. You don't need to fix the world because the world is not the thing blocking your progress. There have always been people succeeding in the same environments where others are failing. The difference is not circumstance, but adaptation. Some people use hardship as a reason to push harder, and some use it as a reason to stop. The market doesn't care which one you choose. Life rewards the person who continues to level up no matter what is happening around them. Growth is not about waiting for a window of opportunity. Growth is about becoming a person who can create opportunity even when none exists. Every time you invest in improving yourself, the ROI eventually shows up in your results. The books you read change the way you think. The skills you practice change the way you earn. The habits you master change the way you live. Small upgrades compound into entirely new lives. The person you are today is temporary. The person you become is determined by what you do from this moment forward. The world doesn't have to become easier, fairer, or more supportive. A better world shows up the moment you become someone capable of winning in the world that already exists. Before we wrap this up, remember, this life is not waiting for you. The world is moving, opportunities are passing, and time will not slow down until you feel ready. Every person who changed their life didn't start with perfect conditions. They started with a decision. The decision to get serious, to improve, to take ownership, to stop being a spectator in their own story. Today can be one more ordinary day, or it can be the day you draw the line and say, from now on, I build myself, not next week, not when you feel inspired, not when everything aligns now. If you want confidence, build it. If you want success, earn it. If you want a different life, become the person who can live it. Not everyone will make that choice. Most people will go back to excuses, to waiting, to comfort. But those who decide to focus on themselves, grow themselves, and bet on themselves, those are the ones who move forward. And the next move is yours.